Tonight, Ottawa unveils new national long-term care standards, and we have local reaction.
The folks who work in our long-term care facilities in this province are some of the heroes of the ongoing pandemic.
Also, discussions are being had about a new downtown building for the Regina Food Bank, with the goal of creating a new food hub in the area. Plus, how soon after fog should we see rain? Our weather specialist looks into the urban legend.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Tuesday, January 31st, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening and thanks for watching. New national standards for long-term care across Canada have been released. The project was launched after the alarming number of deaths in those facilities during the early part of the pandemic. But the guidelines are voluntary and still leave it up to provinces and territories. Advocates are worried that may not be enough to bring about change. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
His smile was contagious.
Eddie Callisto Tavares' father died during a COVID-19 outbreak at the Maples long-term care home in Winnipeg. Staff were so overwhelmed, one night in November 2020, paramedics had to be called in. Callisto Tavares had rare access to visit her dad. She witnessed what other family members never saw happen to their loved ones.
They were crying out that they were thirsty. And I would just be compelled sometimes to just walk down the hall and do nothing but say, help is coming, knowing that there was very little help coming.
More than 17,000 residents of Canada's long-term care homes have died because of COVID-19. At the start of the pandemic, 80% of COVID-19 deaths happened in long-term care and retirement homes, the highest rate among similar countries to Canada. A stark death toll that those behind these new standards say could have been prevented.
If these standards were in place before, I believe we would not be leading the world in having the worst performance in long-term care.
The standards include infection control, emergency planning, and staffing, but also look to improve quality of life for residents, like preventing falls and limiting the use of restraints and antipsychotic medications. And they provide guidelines for how new long-term care homes should be built.
I'm worried that these standards will just sit on the shelf.
That's because they're all voluntary, and it's up to the provinces and territories who are responsible for long-term care to act on them. Those who work in the home say that's why Ottawa should make them law.
Standards must be governed, in our opinion, by federal legislation. Otherwise, we strongly feel that they're going to be meaningless if they're just simply left up to the goodwill of service providers.
The federal health minister won't say whether they would require provinces to sign on to the standards to get more funding.
We are looking forward to sign agreements with provinces and territories to see how they can use those dollars to further meet these new standards.
Ottawa has set aside $3 billion to help provinces and territories bring in these standards. But the parliamentary budget officer says the cost to fix the long-term care system will be much more, nearly $14 billion per year, on top of what is already being spent. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Here in Saskatchewan, the opposition NDP says the newly announced standards should be adopted by the province and made mandatory. The opposition's seniors critic says the provincial government is failing long-term care residents by not having mandatory minimum standards. Adam Hunter explains.
Opposition NDP seniors critic Matt Love says for more than a decade, the provincial government has ignored experts and not made necessary improvements to long-term care in Saskatchewan.
All of the information that they need is right before them. Report after report from the auditor and the ombudsman, including folks who have come here to this building to share their stories with this government. We need them to listen to those voices and to adopt mandatory minimum standards of care.
Love and the NDP made a 2020 election promise to implement minimum hours of care per resident if elected. In 2013, the Saskatchewan Party government replaced those standards with program guidelines for care homes. Love says that did not prevent the COVID-19 outbreak at Regina's Extended Care Parkside, which saw 39 residents die.
Top of my concern is staffing. The folks who work in our long-term care facilities in this province are some of the heroes of the ongoing pandemic. They have served residents beyond what could ever be expected of them. But they can't do it at this pace forever.
Healthcare staffing was discussed by both Saskatchewan health ministers in Saskatoon at an event today. The minister responsible for seniors says the provincial government is working on hiring more continuing care aides. One change the government did make last year was to have the Saskatchewan Health Authority take over 5 extended care homes in the province.
Making sure that we ensure that the patients and the residents and their families were the number one priority as part of that transition, and that went very smoothly, is my understanding, and has resulted in now the SHA operating those facilities and taking care of those residents.
Hindley and Health Minister Paul Merriman say they have not had the chance to look over the voluntary standards of care. Merriman says the government is looking at expanding the role of nurse practitioners in care homes and registered nurses to try and get creative with staffing issues. Adam Hunter, CBC News, Regina.
As Adam mentioned, the health ministers were in Saskatoon today announcing healthcare education seats. To be exact, the government will spend $5.5 million to create about 550 new post-secondary seats in 18 programs. The cash injection is part of the government's Health Human Resources Action Plan. It's meant to boost training capacity at the province's post-secondary institutions and reserve seats for Saskatchewan students in highly specialized programs elsewhere. The plan is based on 4 pillars: recruit, train, incentivize, and retain.
This investment supports the train pillar of our action plan. It will help us focus on some of the most critical needs, such as primary care paramedics and continuing care assistants. It will increase our capacity to train licensed practical nurses, pharmacy technicians, and mental health and addictions counselors, among many others.
Wine says the plan is to spend $60 million over 5 years. Saskatchewan students can also access financial aid, including loans, grants, scholarships, and tax credits if they stay in the province. An environmental watchdog group says the government needs to remove any references to greenhouse gas emissions in Bill 88, also known as the Saskatchewan First Act. The Saskatchewan Environmental Society says the province is trying to use the bill to block federal greenhouse gas legislation. Ottawa wants the country to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to at least 40% below 2005 levels by 2030. The society says Saskatchewan is not trying hard enough to reduce pollution, and that there are ways to boost business and create jobs in more sustainable industries.
Companies like BHP and Evraz and Nutrien, I mean, they would benefit from a net zero grid because it would greatly reduce their Scope 2 emissions of their products. So instead of telling the federal government to back off, which is what the Saskatchewan First Act does, we could instead productively work with the federal government to create jobs and clean growth in our province.
Wright says other jurisdictions see climate change as a nonpartisan issue, and by making it political, he says the government is ignoring previous rulings by the courts as well as the scientific community. The company building the Jansen potash mine is getting $100 million from Ottawa to make it more environmentally friendly. BHP is an Australian company with a Canadian subsidiary based in Saskatoon. The $7.5 billion project has been called the first major potash mine in Saskatchewan in more than 50 years. Yesterday, the federal government says it would give BHP $100 million to cut emissions, minimize the carbon footprint of the mine, and improve worker safety. The mine is expected to be operational in 2026. The Regina Food Bank's plan to expand is being discussed tonight. The decision to purchase the former SLGA store on Broad Street will go in front of the organization's board of directors. If passed, the idea is to create a food hub in Regina's downtown. This is being welcomed by organizations dedicated to ending food insecurity and homelessness in the city. The new facility would only be a few blocks away from Carmichael Outreach.
We're in an area that really deals with a lot of food insecurity. It will mean being able to feed their family and children, maybe relying a little less on the community fridges, which are a wonderful addition to our neighborhoods, but the food bank really does provide a different level of food security.
The food hub will be different from any existing service offered by the food bank, and it draws its inspiration from a grocery store. It would give people in need more dignity and more freedom to choose the foods they eat. Well, the extreme cold warnings are still lingering in some parts of the province, and the clouds have returned with a bit of snow. Look how steamy the river was in Saskatoon today. It may only be Tuesday, but we are looking to the weekend for a warm up. We've only a couple days left in the deep freeze, and there are some sunshiny days coming too. Ethan will have more in his forecast after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. There's an old weather legend in this part of the country. A certain amount of days after we get fog, we end up getting rain. The number of days varies, but the premise is the same. But is there any legitimacy to this wacky weather tale? Our weather specialist Ethan Williams now with the answer.
Its origins are unknown, but that hasn't stopped people from sharing the theory that we can expect rain a certain period of time after we get fog. The most common time range seems to be rain 90 days after we see the fog.
My own personal theory is that it worked a couple times for a few people, and so then that legend kind of got passed on a little bit, and then the more it's passed on, the more it becomes ingrained.
But unlike the rain clouds, Terry Lang says this theory holds no water. But we do have historical weather data from stations across the prairies, and that data tells us when we've had fog and rain. Now, if only there was someone who had crunched that data to tell us if there's a correlation.
If you're going to say it's 90 days later, it's something that is very easily testable.
Enter Philip Harder. He works at the Centre for Hydrology at the University of Saskatchewan, and he's always testing things out and checking the data on his farm near Saskatoon. Harder pulled decades worth of hourly data from Environment and Climate Change Canada's website. He did it first for Saskatoon and then other Western Canada locations like Portage-la Prairie, Moose Jaw, and Edmonton, resulting in nearly 1 million hours of observations. From there, he flagged the days that had fog and the days that had rain. And that's where the math comes in.
Saskatoon, for example, I believe, the probability that we would have rain 90 days after fog was 0.175. So there's a 17.5% chance you'd have rain.
Compare that to the general probability of rain, which turned out to be 16.5%. And it was about the same story in the other locations he surveyed. Common sense also gets in the way of this legend as well. We had that fog at the beginning of January. It lasted a couple weeks. If you say, well, 90 days from there, that puts us, early April. And it often doesn't rain in early April here. We're usually, still dealing with snow. So now the answer is less foggy. Let's just hope it didn't rain on your parade. Ethan Williams, CBC News, Regina.
This weather update is brought to you by the Capital Automotive Group. Trade and upgrade is on now.
And Ethan joins me now. I don't even want to hear Terry mention snow in April.
Yeah, well, it certainly has happened just this past year, in fact. And, being in that La Nina pattern that we are in, I have a feeling that we may be seeing that again this year. But we will wait and see. Maybe we'll get Philip to crunch the numbers for us on that too. Big thanks to him for doing that so we don't have to do all the work. But it is cold now that the fog has left. We have extreme cold warnings in the far north of the province and still along eastern sections as well. Frostbite going to be possible in minutes, and you can see just why it is so cold, or those warnings are in effect because it is very cold in northern and eastern sections. But it's not cold for everyone. In fact, in portions of south and central Saskatchewan, today has been quite nice, and that is thanks to a low pressure system which is attached to a stationary boundary through part of the province, which is keeping some a little bit milder air. Regina, Moose Jaw, we saw a bit of a warm up today, still cold air to the north of there. And then we have this warm front extending from the low pressure system, which is really bumping up temperatures in southwestern Saskatchewan. But wind chills still very cold even at this hour, especially in the far north where that cold air is the strongest. East of there is where we're really seeing the cold. So northwestern Ontario through Manitoba and through much of south and central Saskatchewan, we have climbed out of the -30s for our wind chills this afternoon. And winds have been a little bit lighter, which has helped with that. Compare that to this time yesterday when they were gusting up to 40 kilometers an hour in some places. But the coldest air of this stretch, I think, is yet to come, unfortunately. Tonight, we are going to be seeing, again, very cold wind chills closer to -45 in the very far north of the province. And even through tomorrow afternoon, they'll be near -40 in the north. And then comes Wednesday night into Thursday. And this is when, and keep in mind, as I've been saying, this model kind of undershoots. So it will likely be even colder than this. So that's going to be a really dangerous night, Wednesday into Thursday. So keep that in mind. A little bit of cloud cover and some snow possible in western sections as we head through the night as this low pressure system moves through, but not much snow expected through the day tomorrow as that continues. And then high pressure really going to clear it out. And that's why we are going to be getting so cold over these next couple of days, especially on Thursday. And again, it's really not much snowfall that we're looking for that through the afternoon tomorrow. Mostly cloudy, but maybe a centimeter or two. Winds going to be picking up, which will, with this system, which will make things a little bit cold tomorrow afternoon. But thankfully, on the really cold day on Thursday, it looks like most of us are going to be mostly calm. Save for maybe southwestern Saskatchewan. You will be a bit warmer, though. And with that, of course, comes a little bit of wind. For Regina, we are going to see that cool down on Thursday. Again, mostly cloudy day tomorrow with a chance of some flurries as we start February. Groundhog Day, pretty cold, but then a sharp warm-up heading into the weekend with some sunshine as well. Temperatures going to remain above normal as we head into the beginning of next week. Saskatoon, similar story here for you. I think you could see a chance of some flurries tomorrow. Temperatures dropping with some sunnier conditions on Thursday, and then things are really going to be warming up from there. So not all that bad to start February, Sam, and after we've had a pretty nice pattern through January, too.
I have such a love-hate with the high pressure because I love the sunshine, but I hate the cold.
Yes, joy and sorrow all in one.
That is weather in Saskatchewan.
Yes.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
Gabriel Langlois, also known as Dancing Gabe, has spent years as a top cheerleader for the Winnipeg Jets, the Blue Bombers, and the AHL's Manitoba Moose. And the Moose returned the favor yesterday and threw a party to mark Gabe's milestone 60th birthday. The fan favorite has been to hundreds of sporting events, pumping up the crowd with his moves and his cheerful energy. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. Split screens are a TikTok phenomenon, and they're after one thing: your undivided, divided attention. It looks baffling, but there is a method to the madness. As Eli Glasner explains, it's all about creators using you, the audience, to spread their videos further.
There's something spreading on TikTok. It's so new, it doesn't even have a name. Let's say you have a video you want people to see. It could be someone talking, like me. And if that won't hold their attention, why not add a second screen? Maybe it's a video game, someone pouring sand, even building Lego.
Let's have a coloring contest!
This is what some are calling sludge content, a sea of visually stimulating images to keep you watching just a little longer.
Every millisecond makes a difference.
Because on TikTok, as you know, it's all about the eyeballs.
What's a bit different about TikTok than from other social media platforms is a lot of the algorithm is driven, I think, by just how much time people spend looking at the stuff.
The more you watch, the more the videos are shared. And if 2 screens works, how about 3? I know it sounds ridiculous, but it works.
If you wanted to just grow an account super quickly and have the highest chance of hacking attention on the For You page and getting a video that breaks you into higher tiers of the algorithm, then yes, these types of hacks work super well.
Right, next.
So well that controversial influencer and self-declared misogynist Andrew Tate encouraged his followers to pump out his videos sludge style.
Basically, really mobilize the strategy at scale by getting his Hustlers University affiliate code as sort of the incentive to run these types of accounts.
Now, this approach may appeal to those spreading disinformation because if we're distracted, it turns out we're more susceptible to false claims.
We actually create environments where people are doing some other kind of cognitive task, and that makes it so that they are unable to engage in like deliberation and reflection, and that makes them more likely to believe false news and stuff like that.
Now, in a way, this split-screen approach is nothing new.
That lets him watch one show while he checks out all the others on this remarkable little window.
Right? I mean, we've seen it in sports for a long time, and certainly in movies.
Hi. Hey, are you here for that class?
And, yes, even in news. But for the younger TikTok generation, multiple screens isn't an artistic choice. It's their new normal.
68% of kids are using multiple screens at once, and it is becoming more common and more kind of compulsive.
So where does this leave parents worried about all these screens and stimulation?
Teach them how to use it responsibly, so that they can, as they grow, they learn the important skills they need so that when they're off on their own, they can kind of regulate themselves.
And here we are in split screen. Ethan is back with one last look at your weather.
Yes, hoping to keep your attention for just a little while with a look at our overnight forecast or into tomorrow. We're looking at mostly cloudy conditions, and winds will be light, I think, in Regina. We'll warm up as we go through the afternoon to -15. Not too bad after these past couple of days. Winds staying light, but cloud cover and some possible flurries. Saskatoon will start the morning mostly cloudy again. Some nice light winds, and then a chance of flurries builds in as we head toward the noon hour at -18. Bit of a strange photo to show you this time of year, but this is from Michael St. Laurent in Moose Jaw. He was a winner of one of the categories in the Canadian Wildlife Federation's photo contest, and this was one of nearly 6,000 entries in several categories, Sam. So big congratulations to Michael for Moose Jaw.
Amazing photo and also a terrifying one.
Yes.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And before we leave you tonight, Edmonton is known for many things. The West Edmonton Mall is one of them, and that's what makes this story a talker. Fans of the Mindbender roller coaster had their worlds turned upside down yesterday. Emily Fitzpatrick has a reaction to the ride being closed for good.
It's the end of an era for West Edmonton Mall.
I was shocked. I was shocked. I mean, I heard the rumors like everyone did over the last few years, and I was the biggest, most vocal opponent of the thought of it closing. I would never in a million years thought they would close it.
Coming in at 145 feet, the Mindbender has been the world's largest indoor triple loop roller coaster for nearly 40 years. The architectural landmark has been closed since 2020, but today Galaxyland revealed that closure is permanent, saying the ride will be missed, but they're working on groundbreaking new plans. The news was the talk of social media and mourned by roller coaster enthusiasts. Matthew Duchuk runs the Best Edmonton Mall fan site and says the ride is a source of nostalgia.
Enthusiasts would travel to Edmonton to go on the Mindbender. It has more G-force than all but one other coaster in North America, so it's a pretty extreme coaster. In the 5 years I've been doing this West Edmonton Mall historian gig that I have, I've never had my phone blow up more than today. There are fans reaching out on every platform, wanting comments, sharing pictures, asking my opinion. It's insane. The community is losing its mind.
But with that iconic history also comes tragedy. On June 14, 1986, the last car of the roller coaster jumped the track and struck a pillar, killing 3 people and sending 19 to hospital. It was shut down for more than a year, and after safety modifications, it eventually reopened. Officials say construction to dismantle the Mindbender will start soon, and in the coming months, they'll announce what will take its place. Emily Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Edmonton.
And that is it for us tonight. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/sask or subscribe to CBC Saskatchewan's YouTube channel. Ethan will be back with more news and weather at 11. Thanks for watching and have a great night.